Welcome back to this module. So in this module, we will build the telephone formatter application. So let me first show you the final version of the application that we are going to build in this module. So this will be the final version of the application that we are going to build in this module. So this particular application has a one heading which is telephone formatter. Then we have this particular input type. So whenever I have entered here an input, means the number of a telephone, then you can see it's automatically going to format the number into this particular format. Now you can see this is how our number will be look like, which is actually act as a hint. All right, so this will be a number format hint, so it will actually format the number in this particular format. All right, so if I enter here a different number, then you can see after when I enter the fourth number, then it's going to format the number in this particular format. All right, so this will be the application that we are going to build. Now this application seems to be very simple, but it is not exactly that, because we have to take care of the certain conditions and how we can actually get these three characters in this particular bracket format. All right, so we will learn all of these things in the JavaScript part of this particular project. So in the next part, we're going to start with the HTML part of this particular project, which is our telephone formatter application. So in this lecture, we will start the HTML part of the telephone formatter application. So you can see I have already created the required files inside the Visual Studio Code, and I have launched the final version of the application into my Chrome browser, and this will be the version of the application that we are going to build in this module. Alright, so the first step is inside the index.html, we have to create a one container. Inside of the container, we need to place this particular heading element, then this particular input type, and then we need to also provide this paragraph element, which will be act as a hint for the number formatter. Okay, so the number that we want to format, the result will be look like this. So this will be the three things that we need to place inside the container. So coming back to the index.html, so first I'm going to here type the container and pressing the tab key. Inside of the container, we have to do what? We have to first select the h1 element. Then here we need to add the telephone formatter. Okay, and after that we need to place the input element, that is this particular input element, input type. So the input type is going to be text. Okay, the input type is going to be text here. So the next attribute that we want to specify is the id. So id is going to be like phone input. Okay, so this will be the second attribute that will be used inside this particular input tag. Then we need to add the placeholder text, which is going to be like phone number, or I can go with the telephone phone number. Okay, so this will be the placeholder text that will be visible to the input type. And after that, we need to specify the max length property. So the max length is going to be 16, means the maximum character that it can support. And after that, we need to provide the paragraph element. Now this paragraph element is going to have an ID, or I can just simply go and here, because this will be remain static, it is not going to update it. So I'm going to simply place here like a plus symbol. Inside the bracket, we need to add the code, then space, then we have this particular slash, then again space, and then we need to type a number which is going to be randomly display the data. Okay, and if I control save it, then you can see we get the hint number, which is actually a paragraph element. Now why I have used here a maximum character of 16? If we actually count it, then this is actually a 16 character. So if I come back to the final version of the application, so if we count here, so this is actually our first character, then we have this 3, so 3 plus 2 5, then we have this particular 6, then we have one space which is going to be 7, then 8, then 9, then we have this particular like 5 characters. So here I have actually removed the space. So if I enter a number again, then you can see this is actually our 6 characters, because 2 brackets, 1 plus, and then we have 3 characters. Then we have a space, then we have this particular hyphen, then we have another space. Okay, so we have now 9 characters. Then this is going to be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So total we have 16 characters inside this particular input type. So that is the reason I have actually added here a max length property of 16, so that we can't enter the data more than this particular 16 characters. Now we are done with the HTML part of this particular project. So in the next part, we're going to start with the CSS part of the project, which is pretty simple, which is not very difficult to add. So I'm going to do the CSS part very quickly. It can be done very easily. So you can also do it by yourself if you want to do it, or you can actually watch the next part if you want to see how the CSS of this particular project is done. So now it's time to start with the CSS part of the project. So for that we need to use the style.css file. Instead of that, first we need to select the universal selector. Inside the universal selector, I'm going to reset the default styling of the browser by setting the box sizing to border box, then padding to 0, and also going to set the margin to 0. Once we did that, then you can see in the other version of the application, the default styling of the browser is changed. And after that, I'm going to select the body element. Inside of the body, I'm going to set the text alignment to center. You can see now the things is actually moved to the center of the browser. And then we need to add here a font family. So font family is going to be like sans serif. And then here I will be using the display is going to be like flex. And then we need to use the justify content. It is going to be center. I control save it. Nothing will be happen. Now it's time to use the align items to the center. And after that, we need to add the minimum height. So minimum height is going to like 100 VH. Now you can see the content is shifted to the center of the screen. Then we need to provide the flex direction, which is going to be column. So everything will be arranged in a column like structure. After applying the flex direction column, then we need to use the background color property. Or I can go with the background property because we need to use here a linear gradient function. So we need to provide the linear gradient to the two bottom, and then we need to provide the color code. So the color code is going to be like 3494E6. Then we need to provide another color code which is going to be like EC6EAD. Okay, so if I control save it, now you can see the color of the background is actually changed. And so after the body element, we need to here select the container. So here we want to use the container, and instead of the container, first we need to specify the background color to the container. So right now you can see we have this white background color that has some grayish effect. So I will be here using the background color property. So I will be here using the RGBA function. So it is going to like 255, 255 and 255. Then the alpha is going to be like 0.9. If I control save it and coming back to the other version of the application, you can see now the color is applied to the container. After that, we need to set the border radius to 10 pixel, which will give the rounded corners. And then we need to increase the padding. So padding is going to be like 20 pixel. And once I did the padding, it's time to apply the box shadow, which is my one of the favorite property of the CSS. So 0 pixel, then 4 pixel, and then here I'm going to use the 6 pixel, then the RGBA function value, which is going to be 0. So I'm going to again type the RGBA, edit this one, then 0, 0, 0, and then here I need to provide the 0.1. Once I did that, then you can see now the box shadow is also applied to the container. Now it's time to actually style this particular input type. Right now it is very simple and it's look very ugly. So we need to make it a little bit more beautiful. Okay. So for that, we need to here select the input element. And also after the end of the input element, we're going to select the H1 element. And then we also need to style the paragraph element. So one by one, I'm going to style these three elements. So first we need to select the input element. Inside of the input element, I'm going to first increase the font size, which is going to be like 1.5 rem units. And then we need to add the padding. So padding is going to be like 10 pixel. And then we need to add the border, means we need to remove the border. So border is going to be none. And then we need to add here a width, which is going to be 100%. If I control save it, now you can see the default styling of the input type is actually changed. After that, I'm going to apply a border. So border is going to like 2 pixel, solid border. And then we need to provide the color code for the border, which is going to like 394E6. So this will be the color applied to the border. And then we need to add the border radius property, which is going to be like 5 pixel, which will give the rounded corners. And then we need to provide the margin bottom property, which is going to be 10 pixel. If I did that, now we can see it looks pretty much with the final version of the input type. Okay, now it's time to apply the code for the H1 element. So the first thing is we need to apply the margin bottom property, because right now the heading and the input type are very close to each other. So we need to provide some margin between these two. So I'm going to provide a 20 pixel margin, and then we need to increase the font size. So font size is going to be like 2 rem units. And after that, we need to actually decrease the blackness of the heading element. So if I control save it, now you can see things is now actually changed a little bit more inside the project. After that, for the font size of the paragraph element, I'm going to here use the 1.2 rem units. And then we need to add here a color. So again, I'm actually going to decrease the blackness of the black color of the paragraph element. So now you can see our application will almost look like the final version of the application. The next thing is we need to add the JavaScript code so that our telephone formatter application gets completed, which will be the next step of this particular project. Now it's time to start with the JavaScript part for this particular project. So for that, we need to use the script.js file. Instead of that, first we need to get the reference to this particular input type. So here, coming back to the script.js, so here first we need to create the const type input, means we need to create a constant of name input, and instead of that I'm going to use the document.query selector. So we have a single selector, that is the reason I am actually using here a single selector function, which is query selector. Then we need to define the type of the selector, which is actually input. Okay, if I control save it, now you can see we get the reference to this particular input. After that, we need to set the listener to this particular input. So we want to listen to the input of the input. Okay, so here I will be using the input, and then we need to here pass an event, means an anonymous function. That will be an arrow function, and it is going to accept event argument. Then we need to actually store this particular event, which is const input value. So this will be the variable that I will be using here. So it is like input value, that is going to store the value of this particular e.target.value. Now if I console log this particular value, so if I use here console.log, because right now we want to see the input listener is working perfectly or not. So I control save it, and if I now press the F12 key here, and if I reduce the size of the Visual Studio Code window a little bit more, now if I enter here something like number, then you can see whatever number I type here, it's going to display inside the console. So our event listener is working perfectly, which is the input listener. And now I'm going to close this particular console window. And now after that, we need to actually store this particular value, because right now, whatever number we will type here, we need to actually grab these three numbers. Means we need to extract these three characters from this particular string. Alright, so I'm going to remove this particular console, and here we need to actually check for the condition. So if input value, that is this one, input value dot length, that is this one, input value dot length is actually equal to 4, because in the programming language, if I actually type here some text, if I enter here some numbers, you can see by default the starting index is actually 0. Then this particular 5 will have an index 1, then this is going to be 2, and then this is going to be 3. So we want to actually fetch these three, means fetch these three first characters, and we need to store these three characters into a variable. So for that, we need to here create a one variable. So it is going to be type let, means it is going to be updated multiple times. So that is the reason we need to create this particular variable by using the let. So the name of this particular variable, I'm going to name it as first three numbers. Then I'm going to initialize it with the empty string value. So here inside of the if condition, we need to initialize this particular variable. So first three numbers, it is going to be equal to, and here I'm going to be using the input value dot. So we are going to use here a substring function. Substring, instead of that we need to specify the range of the substring. So it is going to be 0 to 3. Now if I control save it, and if I here use the console log again, console.log, then I will be here pass the variable which is first three numbers. If I control save it, and now if I enter here some numbers, and if I press the F12 key here, So you can see now we are actually getting the 456, which is actually the first three numbers. If I refresh it, try to enter some different numbers, now you can see we get the 454. If I enter here some different number, now you can see we get the 789. So we are successfully able to create a substring from this particular text and storing it inside this particular first three numbers variables. Alright, so now I'm going to close this console window, and now it's time to actually format the number in this particular way. So we need to use the template string feature of the JavaScript. So I'm going to remove this console log, and after that, here we need to update the value of the input, which is this input. So we need to update its value. So value it is going to equal to, and then we need to use the template string. So template string tilt characters. Okay. So here we need to terminate that, or it is actually optional. So first we need a plus symbol, then round brackets. Instead of that, we need to actually display the first three numbers. So those numbers are actually stored inside this particular first three numbers variable. So we need to use here a dollar symbol, then the pair of curly brackets. Inside of that, I'm going to pass the first three numbers variable. Then after this particular round brackets, we need a space, then hyphen, then space, and then we need to here provide the rest of the characters which is typed inside this particular input element. So again, I'm going to use the dollar symbol, then the pair of curly brackets, then input value. Then we need to actually get the last index of the input value. So here I will be using the array brackets, then the input value dot length minus 1. Now if I control save it, and if I again here type something, like if I enter here number, now you can see our number is gets formatted very perfectly like this. So we are successfully able to format the number. Okay, but there is a one problem. If I type the number, and now if I actually press the backspace key, so these numbers are actually perfectly removed. But once I did that, then you can see this is how it will be look like. It is going to be display like in this particular way, which we actually don't want it, because we want to perfectly remove this particular number. You can see if I again pressing the backspace key, it automatically start inserting the rounded brackets. Okay, so we need to handle this particular bug. Okay, so for that, here I need to create another variable, which is actually a previous value variable of type string. So it is going to be also holding an empty string right now, and here we need to create the previous value. It is going to be initialized with the input value. Now this will hold the value of the input type. Once we type the value, this will be used to store the previous value. Okay, and then we need to add a condition inside this particular one. So here I will be using the logical AND operator. Then we need to use the previous value dot length, that is this one, and then we need, if it is smaller than the input length, means the input value dot length. Alright, so if it is data case, if I reduce the window of the browser and if I zoom out a little bit so that you can see the code more clearly. So if input dot length is equal to 4, and if the previous value length is actually smaller than the input value length, then we want to do this particular stuff. Okay, so if I control save it, and if I now type the things, you can see it's actually working fine, because the input length is actually equal to 4. And if I actually here type only like this, you can see now it's actually working perfectly fine. Now our text is removed perfectly. You can see here, if I pressing the backspace key, it's perfectly removed. There is no such a problem exists in this particular application. You can see now I'm pressing the backspace key again and again. But if I remove these condition, this AND conditions, means after this logical AND operator condition, now if I control save it, and if I enter the number here, And now if I try to remove the numbers, means characters one by one, now I'm pressing the backspace key. You can see after that it is going to give me a problem. You can see if I pressing the backspace key, it's giving me the problem. Automatically it's going to add these rounded brackets. So that is how with this particular condition we are successfully able to remove the characters from this telephone formatter application. You can see it's automatically removed, and now we have this freshly empty input type. So that marks the completion of the code for this particular telephone formatter application. So if you like this module, then leave your review, because your review helps me to reach more students and also motivates me to create more awesome content like this for you. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you very much.